Welcome back to our True Identity. We are your recurring guest hosts, the authors of In the Fullness of Time, a year-by-year journey to the Christ.
It's such a joy to be with you again. We're continuing this weekly pilgrimage together, tracing God's very specific, very intentional preparations for the arrival of the Messiah.
And we are now stepping into week 17 of our journey.
That's right. And this week, we're covering 3 consecutive years, AD 7, 88, and 89. Now, these are years that they can sometimes slip into the margins of history.
They really can. They're sort of sandwiched between the big traumatic events.
Exactly. You have the turmoil of the census just before, and then, of course, the full public ministry of Jesus is still years away. But as we researched them for the book, we just found them to be, well, intensely charged.
They're absolutely vital. They're historically and spiritually significant chapters that show God perfectly calibrating the world stage before the curtain was finally raised.
We call this period the fullness of time unfolding. And if you were standing anywhere in the Mediterranean world during these 3 years, 87, 88, or 89, you would have seen this vast, intricate tapestry.
A tapestry woven from what? Ambition, anxiety.
And expectation.
Yeah.
Deep, deep expectation. You can feel that God was, and of course always is, orchestrating everything. The highest movements of emperors and the quietest, humblest longings of the common people all at once.
So when we set that global stage, what we really see is this stark contrast. On one hand, you have immense self-proclaimed power.
And on the other, this deep underlying human fragility. The great Roman Empire under Augustus, it projected an image of just unbreakable strength.
It's all marble and iron, isn't it?
Marble and iron, exactly. Yeah. They were so confident in a dominion that stretched from the chilly forests, way up beyond the Rhine, all the way down to the sun-baked Nile Delta.
This was the era of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace.
A peace that was both a promise and, frankly, a threat.
But our research, it shows so clearly that despite all that polished marble, the empire was operating under tremendous strain. There was so much anxiety.
Right. And those cracks weren't just about, say, who would succeed Augustus, which we'll get into. The empire was, it was ringed by formidable opposition.
You had the Parthians in the east, always maneuvering, always patiently waiting and challenging Roman dominance right there in Syria.
And maybe even more critically, during these specific years, you had the Germanic tribes. Aggressive, unpredictable, across that northern frontier. They had not been fully subdued, not by a long shot.
So this creates this perpetual tension, a global sense of waiting.
It really does. Rome was waiting for its military dominance to just be accepted everywhere. But the peoples under Rome's rule, especially in a place like Judea, they were waiting for something entirely different.
They longed for an end to this cycle of violence and control.
And Judea, this small, rugged province, it sat right at the crossroads of all that tension. It wasn't defined by Rome's marble. It was defined by its own sacred history.
Every hillside, every dusty path, every single stone in Judea held the echoes of Abraham, Moses, David.
It was a place just weighted by prophecy. A place where, as we wrote, heaven and earth felt near enough to touch. It carried the longing of centuries for God's covenant promises to finally be fulfilled.
And this is where you get the core tension of the era, this clash of two very different ideas of peace.
Absolutely. Rome offered the Pax Romana, security enforced by legions, by military discipline, by a vast administrative machine. It was peace rooted in sheer, overwhelming force.
And it was entirely dependent on the mortal life of one man, Augustus.
But the people of Judea and Galilee, they refused that substitution. They longed for a different peace, a true shalom rooted in faithfulness and the fulfillment of God's ancient covenant.
Their hope just remained so fiercely alive. They weren't just waiting for relief from taxes.
No, they expected divine deliverance, a warrior, a prophet, maybe a king who would finally establish God's rule on earth. And this spiritual expectation was the magnetic north drawing history toward that small village of Nazareth.
It's incredible how this ancient struggle isn't just confined to history books.
Not at all. It mirrors the tension we face today in our own identity.
We, like the Romans, we constantly try to manufacture our own security, our own control. We armor ourselves with, professional achievements, financial plans?
Right. Control over our immediate circumstances. We crave that enforced stability.
And yet experience constantly shows us the limits of that human striving. Deep down, we long for a permanence and a peace that only God can provide.
That anxiety Rome felt, despite its colossal power, is the same anxiety we feel when our carefully constructed world begins to slip. These years, 87 through 9, They show us God working right in that gap.
The gap between the human drive for control and his unwavering perfect provision.
So let's turn our attention now to 87 specifically. This is a year defined by, well, by two very different things happening at once.
You have the lingering, almost toxic aftermath of unrest in Judea.
And at the same time, the quiet, unseen formation of the boy Jesus up in Galilee.
The air in Judea in 87. You can just imagine it was heavy.
Oh, absolutely. We are only a year removed from that intense census revolt, the one that flared up under the Roman governor Quirinius in 86.
And we have to be clear, this wasn't just a tax dispute. The revolt, led by Judas the Galilean, it was a profound theological confrontation with Roman authority.
To really get the intensity, you have to understand the administrative shift that happened right before it. Herod the Great's son, Archelaus, he was deposed in 86.
And just like that, Judea went from being a client kingdom to a direct Roman province.
Which brought with it direct Roman taxation. Specifically, a property tax, the tributum sola, and a poll tax, the tributum capatus.
And Judas the Galilean, he galvanized the people by arguing that these taxes, they weren't just a financial burden.
No, it was an act of spiritual betrayal. His whole argument was, if God alone is Israel's king, then submitting to a Roman census and paying taxes to a human emperor, that's blasphemy.
It was an outright rejection of the core identity of the Jewish people.
Exactly. This ideology, no king but God, was the foundational spark of what would become the Zealot movement.
And even though Rome had crushed that rebellion with, brutal efficiency, the memory and the ideology of Judas lingered right beneath the surface.
Especially in the South, in Judea proper. You can imagine the old men in the villages speaking of the summary executions, the increased taxes, the profound sense of loss. Families were still debating it.
Was resistance the right path?
Yeah.
Or submission?
So Rome's response in 87 was exactly what you'd expect. Heavy-handedness. They recognized Judea as a volatile land, and they tightened control, increased surveillance.
And the Roman prefects ruled with firm oversight from their capital, Caesarea Maritima, not from Jerusalem.
A very deliberate choice. The atmosphere was just thick with this simmering, barely contained discontent. It was clear that any new spark would be met with severe retaliation.
Now let's travel 60 miles north, away from that political density of Jerusalem, into the softer hills of Galilee to Nazareth.
And here, Jesus is now approximately 11 years old. This was an age of great transition, moving from childhood toward greater responsibility in the home and the community.
At 11, he was an active helper in the family economy. We could see him rising with Joseph, learning the demanding craft of a tekton.
A carpenter, yes. But so much more. His hands were learning not just the scent of wood and stone, but the geometry of structure, the discipline needed to shape materials.
And the patience to build something that would last. A carpenter in first-century Galilee wasn't just a woodworker. He was a builder. He worked with stone, wood, sometimes metal. He served the whole community.
And this physical education was perfectly mirrored by his spiritual formation. 11 years old marked a crucial stage in serious Torah study.
He was reciting the passages, committing long sections of scripture to memory.
Especially the Psalms and the prophetic books. He was internalizing the history, the law, and the magnificent future promised to Israel.
We emphasize in the book that he possessed a stillness unusual for a boy his age.
Yes. When the scriptures were read in the synagogue, those words, stories of suffering, exile, promise, ultimate redemption, they resonated within him with a depth that was both human and divine. He was absorbing the complete identity of his people.
And he was fully aware of the world's weight. Nazareth was small, but it was on a trade route.
He was the observant child, listening to travelers who passed through, hearing the whispered stories of the recent revolt, the weariness of paying that poll tax.
He saw firsthand the frustration of living under foreign rule. He saw the depth of hope deferred that his people carried.
And the lesson from 87 is so profound, and it speaks directly to our own identity struggles. These are the years of formation, not spectacle. God's deepest preparation happens in the mundane.
In the ordinary. The quiet work shaping wood, doing chores, the relentless studying, it was all vital. We often feel exhausted or unseen in our daily labors, don't we?
The tasks of parenting, the quiet grind of work, the endless administrative duties of life.
But the identity we seek, that sense of purpose and meaning, is so often forged in these very places we wish we could escape.
Jesus' life in 87 assures us that God honors and uses those ordinary moments. Your quiet Nazareths, the places of patient, honest labor, are absolutely vital to God's sovereign plan for your true identity.
The value of the work is just as high when no one is watching.
Now, as we transition into 88, Jesus turns 12. He's crossing another pivotal threshold, while the political and cultural ripples of imperial anxiety begin to travel farther and more aggressively.
In 88, at 12, he's accelerating his transition toward the duties and expectations of a Jewish man. His understanding of the world is deepening.
His questions, both at home and in the synagogue, you can imagine them growing more thoughtful. He is learning not just to recite the Torah,
But to wrestle with its meaning, its weight, and its beauty.
yes, seeking the coherence of God's plan across the centuries of Scripture. And Joseph, his earthly father, he would have recognized this burgeoning maturity.
When they worked together, Jesus would have demonstrated an understanding that went beyond just the mechanics of the job.
Exactly. He grasped the meaning behind the work. Why a foundation has to be deep. Why a plumb line has to be true. Why wood must be shaped with care. He was internalizing patience and precision.
Skills that were necessary for the far larger tasks awaiting him.
And crucially, age 12 was the customary age for Jewish boys to begin making the major pilgrimages to Jerusalem for the feasts.
Particularly Passover. This immense, bustling, politically tense, and profoundly holy city was now directly drawing the boy from Nazareth.
It represented the next phase of his spiritual education and really a direct confrontation with the political reality of Roman-occupied Judea.
But while this quiet, focused preparation was happening in Galilee, the news traveling fastest from Rome that year, it signaled extreme imperial anxiety.
This was the sudden and shocking exile of Rome's most celebrated poet, Publius Ovidius Naso Ovid, banished by Augustus to the remote, desolate reaches of the Black Sea.
And you have to ask, why did the exile of a poet matter globally?
It was a massive statement. It was about the fragility of the Augustan regime and its desperate need for control. Ovid's works, especially his infamous Ars Amatoria, The Art of Love.
They were witty, they were often cynical, and they explicitly undermined the moral and social reforms Augustus was trying to enforce.
Right. Augustus was deeply invested in restoring traditional Roman piety and morality after decades of civil war. He passed these strict laws like the Lex Iulia de Adulteriis Coercendis to regulate marriage, family life, public morality.
And Ovid's poetry was seen not just as being in bad taste, but as subversive. It was attacking the very identity Augustus was trying to craft for Rome.
So the news, even when it reached Galilee in fragments, was a clear signal. The great emperor was tightening his grip not only on military borders and taxes, but on culture, on morality, on his own image.
It revealed Rome's deep insecurity. I mean, a truly invincible empire shouldn't have to fear the verses of a poet.
That's the point. Augustus feared the story Ovid was telling more than he feared any barbarian invasion.
And that insecurity was just amplified by the ongoing, debilitating succession crisis.
It was a huge problem. Augustus had reigned for decades, tying Rome's greatness to his own personal longevity, but his preferred heirs.
His grandsons, Gaius and Lucius Caesar.
They had tragically died. The aging emperor was wrestling with this massive uncertainty about the future, knowing that one faulty succession could unravel everything he had built.
This uncertainty drove a key political strategy in 88, the reintegration of Tiberius.
Tiberius, a highly capable but very stern, very reluctant military man. He had been living in a self-imposed exile on the island of Rhodes.
But with his preferred lineage gone, Augustus was compelled to recall him, to formally draw him back into the center of power.
And it was a calculated maneuver. He didn't just recall him, he adopted him as his son and heir, granting him the critical tribunicia potestas, the tribunician power, which guaranteed his legal and political position.
This move wasn't born out of love or preference.
Not at all. It was born out of political necessity and human failure. This reluctant, difficult man was now definitively set on the path to the imperial throne.
A destiny that would profoundly shape Judea's fate in the coming decades, as he would be the Caesar during Jesus' public ministry.
And this historical detail just speaks volumes about divine providence.
It really does. Augustus's human ambition, his ultimate inability to secure his own preferred, smooth lineage. It forced the reluctant Tiberius into power.
These crises of leadership, these failures of mortal planning, are precisely the mechanisms God uses to set the perfect stage for the true king.
One who needs no political machination, no strategic adoption, and no succession plan defined by human mortality.
God uses the ambition, the failures, the anxieties of the powerful to bring about his own perfect timing. For us, 88 should remind us that even when the news is dominated by a tightening grip of control,
whether it's political control or the burdens we place on ourselves.
God is working through those very pressures to prepare the way for his permanent peace.
Which brings us to AD 9. And this is a year that saw the world shaken to its very core by a military catastrophe, one that starkly contrasted with the unshakable, unseen kingdom growing in Galilee.
By 89, Jesus is 13. He's moving fully into early adolescence in Nazareth. He's capable of helping Joseph with the heaviest labor now carrying roof beams, setting foundation stones.
He's maturing physically, but also spiritually. His eyes hold a gravity that often surpasses his years.
And he continues to draw the attention of the synagogue teachers, not because he argues, but because of the depth of his quiet questions about the purpose of the law, the nature of the kingdom.
There's such beauty in the rhythm of this life. For Jesus, even the hardest labor carried a quiet joy. He was embodying a fundamental purpose in every single action.
Everything had intention, everything had meaning. He was learning patience, endurance, and community by observing the simple, resilient life of the Galilean villagers.
Lessons that would later define his parables about the sower, the seeds, the laborers in the field.
But while this quiet formation was taking place, far to the north, in the dark, dense, unpredictable forests of Germania, the illusion of Rome's invincibility was about to shatter.
One of the greatest military disasters of the ancient world, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest.
The campaign was led by Publius Quintilius Varus, a confident Roman governor, a high-ranking legate. He marched 3 full Roman legions.
The 7, 8, and 19.
That's right, plus auxiliary troops. He marched them into the interior of Germany, convinced he was bringing civilization and Roman order to the tribes. And crucially, Varus placed his trust in the chieftain Arminius.
Arminius, who was a Cheruscan who had been Romanized, even granted Roman citizenship. He was serving as one of Varus's key advisors.
But Arminius was playing a treacherous and, frankly, brilliant long game. While pretending loyalty, he was secretly uniting the Germanic tribes, stoking their deep resentment toward Roman occupation.
The trap was sprung in the Teutoburg Saltus, a landscape of narrow, muddy, forested paths where the organized Roman formations, so devastating in open battle.
They were rendered completely ineffective.
The result was total annihilation. Over several days, the legions were ambushed and massacred.
The estimates range from 15,000 to 20,000 Roman soldiers lost. And 3 eagles, the sacred military standards representing the very honor of Rome, were captured.
It was an unprecedented blow to Roman pride and military reality. Varus himself committed suicide rather than face capture.
The geopolitical fallout from this defeat, it cannot be overstated. When Augustus, the man who had brought peace to the world, heard the news,
he was said to be inconsolable, tearing his clothes, beating his head,
and repeatedly crying out, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." This wasn't just grief, this was profound humiliation. It was a terrifying loss of manpower.
And the news traveled slowly but surely across the empire. It reached Judea and Galilee. It forced the provinces to confront the reality that the unbreakable empire was in fact mortal.
The psychological impact was immense. Rome, which boasted this unmatched power and structure, was profoundly shaken. Augustus permanently halted any expansion into Germania.
He fixed the Rhine and Danube as the definitive static boundaries of the empire, a decision that profoundly shaped the future of Europe.
In this historical catastrophe, it provides the clearest theological contrast of this whole period.
While Rome trembled, worried about the loss of its legions and the crack in its foundation,
the true unseen center of the universe remained unshakable. The kingdom he bore within him was rooted in eternity, not in military strength or political ambition.
And in this, we see God's strength demonstrated through humility.
Yes. The world measures power in legions and marble. God measures power in patience and hiddenness.
The true Son of the Father walked unnoticed through the dust of Galilee. This juxtaposition just shows us that the stage was set. Human power had reached its peak, and it had just demonstrated its ultimate limit.
Preparing the way for a king whose foundation is eternity.
So, having covered these global events, we really have to zoom in now and provide that necessary depth to understand the specific environment Jesus was growing up in.
Right. Contrasting the volatile longing of Judea with the rhythm and resilience of Galilee. These differences really shaped how people were anticipating the Messiah.
Judea in the south was just thick with this palpable tension. It was bruised by the recent revolt, wounded by the census.
And it lived under the exceptionally heavy hand of direct Roman prefect rule. These prefects, like the one who came before Pontius Pilate, governed from Caesarea Maritima,
that Roman city on the coast, deliberately keeping a distance from the religious heart of Jerusalem. Their very presence outsiders, ruling with pure Roman interests, was a constant source of bitterness.
And the specifics of the oppression, they were both economic and theological. Taxation was that constant, painful thorn.
And beyond that, the crucial high priesthood was directly controlled by Rome. They appointed and deposed high priests whenever they wanted.
Which created this intense suspicion among the people. They saw the religious hierarchy as tainted, as compromised by Roman approval.
And then during the major Jewish festivals, Roman troops would parade through Jerusalem, not to ensure safety, but as an aggressive show of force.
A constant, abrasive reminder that any rebellion would be instantly and brutally crushed.
This environment fueled a deep theological defiance.
The ideology that Judas the Galilean had championed, no king but God, it didn't fade. It spread beneath the surface, feeding the burgeoning zealot movement.
They interpreted the Roman presence, their standards, their coinage with the emperor's image as pure blasphemy.
They longed for a militant, decisive intervention from God. Judea lived in this spiritual tension, reciting ancient promises but demanding a warrior king who would violently fulfill those prophecies.
Now contrast all of that with Galilee, the home region of Jesus.
Galilee, though it was still under Roman jurisdiction governed by the client ruler Herod Antipas, it felt fundamentally calmer.
It was shaped by the rhythm of the soil, the changing seasons, and the centrality of Scripture in daily life.
And Nazareth itself was tiny, perhaps one of the most obscure villages in the region, focused intensely on kinship, on shared agricultural labor, and a deep devotion to the local synagogue.
The Galilean environment was a constant organic teacher for Jesus.
The rugged hills around Nazareth trained his physical endurance. The fields, where the community worked side by side, taught him the cycles of sowing, harvesting, and waiting,
which became the powerful metaphors for his most famous parables.
He observed the people's deep resilience, how they celebrated the feasts faithfully, shared resources, maintained the centrality of the community and the Torah, even in the middle of hardship.
But it's important to note, Galilee wasn't isolated from Roman power.
Not at all. Just 4 miles from Nazareth, the great city of Sepphoris, the administrative capital of Herod Antipas's tetrarchy, was being rebuilt into a grand Hellenistic metropolis,
complete with Roman architecture. Jesus was exposed to this contrast daily. He saw the opulence and the infrastructure of the empire just a short walk away.
And yet, he remained deeply rooted in the ordinary life of his people. He wasn't drawn into that political or architectural grandeur.
The villagers of Nazareth, they saw only a boy becoming a young man. They were completely unaware of the unparalleled glory wrapped in the sheer ordinariness of his life.
He was seeing the complexities, the longing, the injustice. But he was preparing not to lead an army, but to lead a movement of eternal significance.
And when you synthesize the world stage of 87 through 9, you see God's unmistakable design.
He was weaving it all together. Human ambition, the expansion of Rome, human failure, Augustus's inability to secure his lineage, the disaster at Teutoburg.
And human longing, Judea's political expectation and Galilee's quiet devotion, all of it woven into one grand tapestry.
The world had filled up with political instability and a profound spiritual hunger. It was the perfect, necessary fullness of time for the Messiah to arrive. The ground was ripe for the true king who would address the needs of both the shaken empire and the oppressed province.
As we bring our analysis of these historically and spiritually rich years to a close, we have to return to the central theme of our true identity.
Because the most significant work God was doing in AD 7, 8, and 9 was not loud. It was slow, steady, and intensely personal.
Unfolding in a village too small to even map onto any imperial census record.
The pressure and tension Jesus experienced, the political weight, the cultural anxiety, the demands of daily labor were all part of his full humanity and his perfect preparation.
And the world around us, too, hasn't stopped shaking. We continue to live under burdens. The relentless pressure of achievement, the demand for control,
the exhaustion from constant striving, and the unspoken wounds we carry from our silent internal battles.
We, like the people of Judea and Rome, are caught in that same tension. We seek the temporary security of our own achievements and controls,
while desperately longing for a lasting peace and permanence. We feel unseen, unheard, or sometimes just too broken to be utilized.
But the identity of the Son of God, forged in those hidden, ordinary years of Nazareth, it speaks directly to those feelings.
The God who moved through that obscure village still moves among those who feel unnoticed or inadequate. His profound eternal work often begins not in the public spectacle, but in the quiet Nazareths of our disappointment, our routine, and our daily patient labor.
If you feel caught beneath external expectations, if you are weighed down by the constant striving for control, or if you feel that your contribution is just too small to matter.
The story of AD 7 through 9 reminds us that God's power is revealed in patience and persistence. Healing and wholeness is a process of small, brave steps, honoring the patience of the formation years.
The Savior who grew up in obscurity, who learned his craft with patience, and who wrestled with the scriptures in quiet devotion, ensures that none of us walk our hardest roads unseen.
You are seen. You are not alone. And the ordinary life you lead today is precious in His sight. He is preparing your heart in this present moment, just as He prepared the world 2,000 years ago.
We invite you to carry this truth with you this week, that your identity is not defined by the size of your empire or the success of your ambition, but by the King who humbly stepped into the smallness of history.
May the Lord bless you and keep you as you continue to walk toward the freedom and true identity He has prepared for you. We will walk with you toward that freedom, one step at a time.